Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Manisha Lozier at Promise 54, and I'm going to commence our call by stating officially that this interview is a public record per Louisiana Revised Statute 441 and will be recorded and posted to the Bessie website for viewing by Bessie members as well as by members of the public. Having said that, let me start by thanking you, Cade, for being here today, and also for your interest in this role and the time you've taken to date to prepare your application. We're so eager to get to know you even better. On that note, let me acknowledge the leaders on the call. With me are Bessie member and work group chair, Kira Orange Jones, who represents Bessie District 2, and Bessie member and work group member, Ronnie Morris, who represents Bessie District 6. Just a few more words about our format today and how we'll plan to proceed. The Bessie members will pose 16 questions covering 8 topics, and we plan to allocate 100 minutes to accomplish this. I will stay off screen, but I'll provide oral time checks every 30 minutes for you in an attempt to pace the conversation, as well as a final check when there are only 5 minutes remaining. If time allows at the end, Cade, you'll have an opportunity to make closing remarks. So, unless there are any questions, we'll begin now with Mr. Morris's first question.
Thank you, Manisha. Kay, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As Manisha said, we have 16 questions this morning on 8 general topics. The first topic is the superintendent's role. There are 6 questions on this topic. So to kick that off, tell us, what is it about Louisiana and this position that most interests you?
Okay, thank you. So appreciate the question. I would start off just by saying, retelling a story I tell quite frequently, especially whenever I'm around young school children. And I ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the reason I ask that question is because I think it's important for us to have our students think about their future and think about their possibilities and not be limited in that thought. And so whenever I was in first grade in Miss McAllen's class, the teacher goes around the classroom and she asks the students, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so the different students give their answers. Some say, I want to be a policeman, I want to be a nurse, a medical doctor, a football player. And when she comes around to me, I say, when I grow up, I intend to be the school principal. And I intend to be the school principal here at this school. And she kind of looked puzzled, and I think everyone laughed and thought, well, that's an odd thing to do. Who wants to be the principal? But for me, growing up with very, humble beginnings, I saw education very early as my opportunity in life. And being in school every day, I saw the principal as the person who was able to make a tremendous impact at our school. And so roughly two decades later, I was installing a STEM lab into that very classroom as the principal of that school. And my kindergarten teacher, who was my kindergarten teacher whenever I was in kindergarten, was still at the school. So that was a unique experience. So I prepared myself to the best of my ability over my lifetime to serve as an educational leader. That's the only job I ever wanted to do. And from working in college to taking my first job, and I didn't want to take an easy job. I thought to myself, where can I get the best experience? So I only applied at high poverty schools, and I got my first interview at J.S. Clark Middle School in Shreveport, which is a very from a socioeconomic standpoint, those children needed a lot. And so I went to my interview, went in there, interviewed with the principal and the assistant principal, and 30 minutes later, I walked out with the job. And I thought to myself, man, Cade, you are super smart. You go on one interview and you get the job. And only later did I realize I was like the only person that applied for that job in half a year. And so they were readily able to give that to me. And so I did the work there, and then I wanted to coach. And so I went into the high school setting, taught social studies and English, and coached girls basketball. As a guy in his early 20s, coaching a group of 15 high school girls was definitely a new experience for me. We did well. Was able to, teach, serve as assistant principal at a couple of different schools, service principal. That school with our team that we built, left that with the highest performance score it ever had. Took a job at a district level, coaching principals and trying to help principals get better at their work. Was elevated by circumstances into the superintendency in that system, and served in that role for 6 years in North Louisiana in a suburban/rural setting. And when the role became available in Jefferson Parish schools with 50,000 kids in a large urban setting, it was really enticing to me, because I felt like that was a place where the state really needed help. And I saw an opportunity to really help kids in an urban setting in South Louisiana. And so took on that role, built a dynamic team, and we've been doing great things here. I have been someone over almost a decade in the superintendency that has tried to avoid one of the problems that I see in Louisiana education, which is the polarization of this side versus that side, and this idea versus that idea, or this configuration of the school versus that configuration. I've tried to be pragmatic. I've tried to be thoughtful and deliberate, and really just take the best from everything and make my situation in the schools that I was leading better. And I love my state. I am a Louisiana guy through and through. This is the place I want to be. I have had opportunities to go elsewhere, and did not do that, because this is the place I want to be. And so it's a real honor for me to even be on this call today, talking with you guys about the state superintendency in my home state, from a little boy who in first grade said he wanted to be an educational leader. And if I'm blessed to go into this role, it would be for me an honor of a lifetime, no doubt. I would hope to invest 8, 10, 12 years in the role, be maybe a long-term solution for a situation. I would not intend to tear everything down to build it back up, or do everything exactly the same way. I would just approach it like, how can I add value to this system, and how can I do my part to get the most out of every individual, both inside the walls of the school and outside, so that we can do better for kids. And I've had to make hard choices as an educational leader, but I've never really I've been concerned about it, but I've known that that's my mission, to do what I'm supposed to do for children. And no matter how hard that has been, that is what I've always tried to do. And so for me, this is an honor to have this conversation. If you guys think that I'm the person for the job, I'll step in there. I'll make this my new mission. I'll put everybody on my back, and we'll go forward. And if not, I understand, and I'm thankful regardless.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to move to question number 2 of our 16. Question number 2, given what you know about the Louisiana Department of Education at this moment, and with full recognition that your answer could change upon learning more, what are the top 3 priorities and goals in your first year in the role?
Well, this is a different question today than it would have been 2 months ago. And so, right now it has to be the response to the COVID-19 situation in the state. I do think up front, that has to be what we have to look at. And whenever I talk about that, I've been on the ground with this as the superintendent of the largest system in Louisiana, and even before the governor's closure for about 2 to 3 weeks, we were trying to put out solid guidance. We were trying to put out a ton of good information to our kids and our families, and we did that. And whenever the governor's closure came about, we then stepped up to do other things, whether it was meals at 13 locations, now bus routes for delivery, a whole suite of online resources for our kids, or paper-based packets for those without the capabilities. You know, we've done a ton, but I think that right now one of the major priorities has to be response to the coronavirus situation. And whenever I think about it, I really think of three different things that the department will have to go through. One is just instructional recovery for kids. There is no doubt that school systems, traditional charter leaders, are doing their best to make sure that we are not losing kids through this situation. But let's not be naive to think that that the normalcy has been an interruption for kids academically. And so I think from what we do in the summer with children, assuming we can congregate, versus what our school calendars look like next year, both maybe the days that are involved in terms of the educational system, or maybe schools within school, or intervention hours, or after school, or weekend programming. We have to recover instruction for kids. And this will also play into what our accountability system looks like as well. The next thing, which is really a regret that I have, is technological preparedness within the coronavirus response. I think one of the things that this has really exposed for us is our lack of readiness in terms of technology. Not simply a device, but the actual internet service to be able to run if you have a device. And then if you have the device and you do have internet, how then do you best serve children through that approach? And I think we'll have to address that as a state. And then the next part of the coronavirus response for me, I think, is people are going about their lives to some degree, maybe without a true picture of what the financial problems and concerns will ultimately be from this with the economy, lack of sales tax dollars, et cetera. And so I think systems are really going to be facing a downturn in their revenues, and it's going to force them to make some critical decisions on how to best serve kids with even probably less resource than they have now. I think that's a place where I can really step in, because unfortunately, my superintendency has always been one where I've had to reduce expenditures. Nearly 40% revenue reduction whenever I was in DeSoto, stepped into Jefferson, and we had to do more of that. So I think that I'll have some background to handle that. So I'll go with coronavirus first. Next, I would probably say the edification of the teacher. You know, if we have quality teachers in front of all of our kids, it's the most important thing. You know, a quality teacher armed with a robust curriculum, and the state has done a really good job, in my opinion, of prioritizing curriculum, but we have to do more in terms of edification of the teacher. And so how do you do that? I think the first thing that you have to do is invest in school leadership. You know, teachers want to work with someone that they find acceptable to them, that they respect, that they believe values their voice, and that they believe is taking their opinion, and at the same time working to provide opportunities for them to hone their craft. So edification of the teacher in that way. From a building a pool standpoint, I think we have to do a lot of work with our university system, but also private providers who can help us really develop an army of teachers. And with that, and with the downturn of the economy, I think we're probably going to have a unique positive situation over the summer where people who may have been employed in other areas say, you know what, maybe now is the time for me to teach. And so I think stepping into the summer, almost immediately, we need to be prepared with providers and universities so that they can ready teachers to enter the field in August, or whenever we're available to congregate or not congregate. So that's important. I think whenever I talk about edification of teacher, I think about some of the things with projects like Ed Rising, where we're building our own. And I've tried to do that as a superintendent. I think building our own teachers in our state is great. They have local investment into their communities and their schools. And then another important part of edification of the teacher is compensation systems that make sense. You know, we have compensation systems that are in some ways archaic, but they were built because in a period of time in America, people discriminated based on race or gender, And so a universal salary schedule was built to prevent that from taking place. So it created a sameness. And so one of the approaches that I've taken in multiple systems, both in DeSoto and now in Jefferson, is a differentiated model where you have a base pay that employees, educators can depend on, but simultaneously there are incentives built in where teachers who want to take on more leadership roles but not be an administrator have an opportunity to do that, but also earn additional compensation for that. Teachers who want to teach in more challenging environments receive additional compensation for doing that. Teachers who hold from a market standpoint a certificate that might be more desirable in terms of market demand, paying them additional funds, and then teachers who are doing well by kids, giving them an opportunity to earn additional stipends. And so that's my approach that I've used in a couple of different systems, and it seems to be working. And I think it's a progressive approach. And so I think it's all part of that edification of the teacher. And there are a ton of things I could talk about, from CTE to low performing schools to citizenship in the schools, et cetera, et cetera. But the third one, since you're limiting me to three, is early childhood education. I have been a champion for early childhood education. I think that it is the most important educational challenge of our generation, educationally. Over half of our kids in Louisiana come to us not kindergarten ready. And that means they can't count to 10. They don't know the difference between red and green. Many of our kids don't know their own formal name. They only know a nickname. We know that some studies will show some parts of the brain are 90% developed before a kid even gets to kindergarten. We know that kids from low socioeconomic backgrounds have a 30 million word gap. These are all studies that we could cite, but I do think that it's gaining traction. I think it's gaining traction in people's appreciation of the need for early childhood education. I think the department and legislators did a good job with the Act 3 legislation that forced people to come together and collaborate. I think that it's gaining traction in the legislature, where those individuals are really understanding the importance of that. And probably more important than the state legislature is local traction that it's gaining, where you see local city councils, like I applaud New Orleans City Council for investing heavily in early childhood education and tapping the state match. And so I'm trying to have conversations, or I am having conversations right now locally with our council members, our state delegation of nearly 30 members, so that we can continue to pour emphasis into early childhood education. Whenever I was in DeSoto, we went through significant expenditure reductions, but I always prioritized three things. I said, look, team, I know we have to make reductions. I know we have to cut, but let's avoid these three things at all costs. One being teacher pay, one being teacher professional development that was job embedded and meaningful, and then the third being early childhood education. And we offered universal early childhood education. But it's important to think this is not just about 4-year-olds. This is also about kids birth to 3. And, the dilemma for the parent is, I need to go to work, but I can't afford childcare. But at the same time, I can't go to work because I can't afford childcare, but I can't get childcare because I can't go to work. And so they're in a quagmire of, what do I do? And the economic negative impact is tremendous on the state because of that. So I would continue to be a champion for early education, do as much as I can to support that legislatively, and working with local leaders to support that within their own communities, because I believe if we want our state, our regions, and our communities to really transform, I think that is the key.
Okay, thank you. I'm moving on to question number 3. Question number 3, 2/3 of Louisiana students are considered disadvantaged. With some level of detail, please describe how you have moved or will move the needle for the most disadvantaged of them.
Yep. First of all, I think I should give a disclaimer that if anyone thinks there's a silver bullet for this, there's not. If anyone thinks there's a box program or go to that publisher and get this canned program, that's not the answer. I've been fortunate to work from the very start of my career in schools that are just like this. Whenever I started my first job in a middle school, that was the school. Moving into the superintendency in DeSoto, where we were almost 70% economically disadvantaged, and some schools being in the upper 90s. Being able to move those schools where we no longer had failing schools from 2010 to whenever I left the system, in terms of district performance score, we went from 49th in the state of 70 systems to number 9. And we're ranked for top 10 in minority student outcomes and top 10 for special education student outcomes. And there's not one thing. It's an approach of many different things. It's employing strategy that makes a difference. So you have to think about, what do we know that does work, and where are those things working? And so, 13 years ago, I finished my dissertation, and the thing that I studied was the principalship and what were the common factors of principals that their schools were super successful in an accountability scale of moving a system forward. And there are shared themes, and I've always pressed in on those things. But if you look in Louisiana, you can look at some of the work of the high poverty, high performing schools. We have a set of schools in this state that are models for this right now. And we should be going into those schools, exploring what those schools are doing, trying to replicate those practices in other settings. But I'll tell you, I hate to continue to key in on this, but when you look at high poverty, high performing schools in Louisiana, one of the things that you see is an effective principal. And that does not mean this is like the most charismatic person ever that, walks into a room and everybody flocks to that person. No, it doesn't mean that. It means they're a person that sets high expectations for faculty. They're a person that believes that all children can learn. They're people that cultivate an environment within teachers that says all kids can learn, and we're going to provide unrestricted access to the best content we can. For so long, I feel like schools have said, you know what, those kids, whoever those kids are, they're not ready for that content. They're not ready for that assessment. But I think in these high performing, high poverty schools, they say, you know what, we're not going to restrict access. We believe that if we give our kids access to the best content, scaffold them up where they need to be scaffolded up, or extend them beyond if they're a kid that needs to be extended beyond, that's what works. I think you also look in those schools and you have teachers that are reaching out to families, and you don't always get a connection. Let's be real, that doesn't always work, but you are constantly trying. I think in those schools, curriculum certainly matters, as we talked about that, but also a structured approach to literacy. If a child cannot read, it's said all the time, they can't do many other things. And that doesn't mean just having a teacher in a classroom and saying, teach reading. That means very, very systematically knowing where every child is. It may be a phonics issue, it may be phonemic awareness, it may be fluency, it may be deconstruction, it may be ultimately comprehension, which getting to a comprehension problem is great because it means you've really got past all of these other issues. And so having a standard protocol for every kid of knowing what diagnostic looks like, and then what does intervention or extension look like, really matters in those schools. And those are some of the most important things that you have to do in those schools: leadership, the quality of the teacher, unrestricted access, parental engagement, effective reading programs, and then building efficacy in everyone, whether it's the teachers, the staff, or the parents, so that they get a sense that they can do this. And from the district level or the state level, from an equity agenda, realizing that some schools, some kids need more and different things than other kids, and having an equity agenda that doesn't mean sameness, but really differentiates support and resources. And that's what we've tried to do here in Jefferson. We've set apart some of our schools that really need more support, and we've pushed in additional resources, prioritized hiring, targeted mini grants, just a number of things to try and lift those schools up to be in a better place. And, I think that if you look at our work in DeSoto, I know that it works. If you look at our work in Jefferson, I realize I've only been in this seat about over 2 years in Jefferson, but our progress monitoring data from the third quarter of this year is showing that these things again work. There is not a silver bullet. There's no box approach, but it takes people who are willing to get in and invest and commit to all children, regardless of zip code, achieving what they want to be when they grow up.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Question number 4, you've spoken to this already and to some extent, but maybe there's an opportunity to give some specific examples. What experience do you have running multi-year initiatives in rural, poor areas of a state? Please include your reflections on challenges, accomplishments, and learnings.
So, Ronnie, just for clarification, we're talking specifically about the rural parts of the state with this question and their success?
Well, I wouldn't say just success, but we want to talk about challenges, accomplishments, and learnings, but specifically focused on, yes, those rural and poor areas of a state.
Yeah. So, I'm home for me is North Louisiana, and North Louisiana outside of Shreveport, Bossier, Monroe, Ruston, essentially that's who we're talking about. And not to say that doesn't exist in, below I-10, because it does, but I'm just setting that up as that's the majority of my background. Served as president of the North Louisiana Superintendents Association, which was a combination of roughly 26 superintendents from that part of the state. And so I'm keenly aware of their challenges, whether it's I'd start out by saying number one is locating quality staff, locating teachers to actually do the work, and getting those teachers to commit to some of those areas is a real challenge. I would say, technology access is a real challenge. Another concern is career and technical education in those areas, because if you live in a dynamic region like Orleans, Jefferson, kind of that metro New Orleans region, or if you're in the Lake Charles, kind of Calcasieu or EBR area, Shreveport, Bossier, you have access to business and industry that they may not have in those areas. And so I think that there's an opportunity in those areas to do additional things with Jumpstart. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in the conversation later, career and technical education. But they have a host of challenges that many are the same, but there are many that are different. And I think it would be important as state superintendent, and I think maybe one of my strengths is trying to move people from just compliance to a level of commitment. And for me, being able to walk into those systems and saying, everybody, look, I understand. I've been there. I know what you're dealing with to staff a school. I know what you're dealing with in terms of access. I know what you're dealing with when the local sales tax dollars and property tax dollars aren't there because your community is leaving you. And you're going to have to take some bold approaches that you haven't taken in the past. I'm a guy that has had to do some really hard stuff to make budgets work. And every time I've done that, I've always been able to, at the same time, make outcomes better for kids. I think that, without going into details, some of our rural systems are going to have to make some more collaborative decisions with each other. I think they're going to have to look at maybe some of the models that have been used in Texas, where they do co-ops for some of their services. I think we're going to have to look at what teacher certification and pushing additional teachers into those areas might look like. And I think they're certainly going to have to explore the benefit of technology once they get access and devices where that doesn't exist. But it is a unique challenge, and I'm thankful that I did see something out of the governor's office that he intended to provide some resource for rural revitalization. which I think will be really important. And if dollars are available, we're going to have to be really smart at the state level at how we utilize them, so that it's not just an infusion of dollars into those areas, but it's creating pilots and processes that are then sustainable for them moving forward.
Great, thank you. We're on question 5 now of 6 on this topic. So question 5, let's assume you're the superintendent. If new federal education dollars become available through an economic stimulus package, and assuming you have the option to maintain a state set aside of $50 million or send those dollars directly to districts along with other money, what would you do? What would your plan be for the funds?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a good bit here in Jefferson over the last couple of days, and you know, I know that this is not a stimulus package; it's a relief package, but it's also going to be a relief package for local systems. One of the things that is one of my greatest regrets now at this point is not having this system up one-to-one for kids, and not having been able to make sure the internet access is available throughout the parish. Now, some of those would be lofty things for me as the parish superintendent to accomplish, internet access throughout the whole parish. But, you know, I've been on the phone as of yesterday with Public Service Commissioner advocating for this. I've been on the phone with local council members advocating for this, because I can go out and buy a device for every kid tomorrow, assuming those are available with supply chain. But it won't necessarily matter if I don't have access across the system to the internet. So my concern has been kind of apocalyptic, I guess you could say, is what my team had said. If worst case, what does this look like? Being able to go completely remote, even for the start of next year if we have to. So we understand just this information is trickling in, but we understand that we can expect to receive a certain dollar amount with the stimulus. And so for us here in Jefferson, our initial thought would be really use that resource to get us up and going so that we can go completely remote in times of crisis when we need to do that. And making sure I'm having conversations with the key individuals to get the 5G access across the parish, get hotspots if needed, whatever's necessary. But one of the other parts of the funds simply has to be, how do we recover minutes for children? Because I feel like that they have lost minutes because of this. So does that mean different things in the summer? Does that mean toying with the calendar a little bit for next school year? And so some of those funds might give us the ability to do that. In the state role, I think that what a thoughtful leader would do would be, before making just a blanket decision, oh, I have all the answers, this is the best thing to do, is really to consult with the board. What are they hearing? What are their beliefs? What do they think are their priorities with these funds? Consult with local systems and local charter leaders to see what their needs are. But I don't think we've seen the last of this. And by that, I mean a situation in the world where we have to ready to do things educationally, not in our brick and mortar buildings. I think there are examples that we can gain from some of the online systems that already exist in our state and throughout the nation that will help us solve some of the problems. But I think that there will need to be I think there will need to be a set aside at the state level. But I think that you're also going to have to push dollars into local systems to ready them for the future. And it may not be a virus. It may be a hurricane. It may be a tornado. But being able to do this with the stimulus money that we have, and by this I mean prepare everybody to be the capacity to go remote as needed, I think ensures a continuity of education that we don't have now. As a local superintendent, sometimes you have outbreaks of flu in a system, and you have to make a decision to, close a school down for a period of a day, go in, completely do a sanitation process. Well, that's a day or two that you lose. And so if we were able to do these things, I think we'd have more continuity in our system in Louisiana. And I think that it would be important to survey leaders across the state, the board, and come up with a collective decision on how to use the dollars, because, your budget is a expression of your values. And we have to think what we value moving forward, given what we now know.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to indicate that we've passed about the first 30 or so minutes of our time.
Okay, thank you, Monisha. So that gets us to question 6, the last question in this topic. Question 6, Cade, roughly 5 years after you're hired, what does Louisiana's education system look like? What will have changed? And what will have stayed the same?
So when I interviewed for the superintendency in Jefferson, one of the questions that the board asked and the community asked was, what's your vision for this system? And I fundamentally believe then, and I fundamentally believe now, that that was not the right question. And I rephrased the question to believe what I felt like was the accurate question, which is, how do we get to a vision that is shared collectively across the board with universal ideas and values? And I promised my community here that that's what I would do. And so we spent almost a year, while implementing things that we had to implement quickly, looking at what are best practices in education across America, specifically in urban education, looking at all the data of our kids and our teachers, every bit of that we could look at, and then really hearing from our communities about what they valued in their education system for the parish. And once we kind of triangulated all of that data, we were able to build a plan that we deemed 2024, the future our kids deserve. And in that plan, so, it's been my approach in 2 different districts, and people say, that's very corporate looking, but it's not. It's just a game plan. It's a playbook that's easily accessible and understood, and it has here are the goals of the system, and not just here are the goals, but here are the specific things we're going to do to make sure we hit that, and here's the progress monitoring, tracking information we're going to use along the way to inform our decisions. And because of that, just in our first couple of years, you see the meter moving in a positive direction in almost every indicator. And so that time was very valuable because we were able to invest our entire community with that. Louisiana is as a whole is not in that same situation that Jefferson was in, is because we already have an adopted ESSA plan, and there was a lot of investment in local communities in trying to sense what is important in Louisiana with our education plan, because the federal government did give us a set of flexibilities. And so for me, that's not a complete process that I have to do over, because so much of that has already happened. But I think it's important that plan not just be something that's on a shelf somewhere, and it's not something that is not universally understood. And so I think with our ESSA plan, we have to do a better job of operationalizing it to the masses. And I think that's an opportunity where, I would probably have some value being able to go into systems in every corner of the state, listen, understand what the complications are, try and help them understand what the intent of the plan is, and try and see how we can't move it forward together. So I would hope that the goals that are already set within that plan would be some of the things that we have achieved in 5 years. I would hope that we would have made tremendous progress in early childhood education. I would hope that we would be a place where people from across the nation want to come and look and say, this is how you turn around persistently struggling schools. These are the things that you do in persistently struggling schools to turn those around. I would hope that Louisiana would be a place where we're not struggling to fill teacher vacancies, but we have an abundance of people who want to come in and be teachers, because we have built up that profession. And so those would be some of the areas where I would really want to commit my time. We can't do everything, but at the state office, you have to think through and really this is true in Jefferson too, because we're so large at 51,000 kids. You have to think through what levers can you pull system-wide to get results at the school sites. And so I think that's how we have to continue to approach it at the state, is realize what is the vision. So much of that is already set forward with the ESSA plan. But then how do we provide the support that systems need, that's meaningful support, so that they can do this work that we're asking them to do. Keeping them inspired to do this work, because I believe in our people, but also believe people need inspiration. And then shared accountability from the superintendent on down for doing those things. What I don't want to change, and I think that was part of the last part of what will not change or what you don't want to change, is I love our people and I love this state. And no matter who I talk to and what they believe, one thing that has been consistent is the passion that people have. They are passionate about their belief system. And while person A may not agree with person B, they're generally equally passionate about education in the state of Louisiana, but because it's just so important. It's important for our economy, but I'm not one of those people that believes the sole role is just to produce a worker. I think that we have to do that, and we have to make sure our kids are career or college ready. But I want us to be a state that builds a quality person as well. And I think if you look around the country at discourse, there's not a greater time for civics education maybe than right now. And I think we need to really work to build good citizens in this state as well. And we have passionate people, and I hope that wouldn't change.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, that closes out that topic on the roll. So thank you for your comments there. Earlier, you spoke to early childhood education. We have one question on that topic. So question 7, how do you plan to continue to support and raise awareness for the early childhood work that's being done now in Louisiana? And what is the evidence that you've prioritized this professionally?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ronnie, I answered a lot of this earlier.
Right.
I'll go through it again. I'll bore the audience maybe again. I'm thankful for the work that's taking place. And whenever I think of the State Department of Education right now, and certainly people are always willing to throw stones at me or our system or the state or anybody else, and oftentimes throw a stone and then hide their hand. I think that this is really a place where we should applaud our State Department of Education, applaud the leadership within that department at the superintendent level, assistant superintendent level, for the work that they've done in this space, and applaud some of the members on Bessie who have been really, pushing on this area for some time in their local communities and at the state. You asked me what is my background in this, and I shared this already, but in DeSoto, despite the fact that we had a 40% reduction in revenue, 40%, that's like taking your budget, cutting it in half. That's what I dealt with. And we came out stronger because we prioritized. And we truly put the horses in front of the cart, and we funded it so it made sense. You fund your priorities. And we have to fund the priority in Louisiana. I'm thankful for the work of the State Department. I'm thankful for the work of Act 3. In DeSoto, we prioritized early childhood, universal pre-K for every family in high quality settings with certified teachers who got robust training. In Jefferson right now, I'm the lead agent for the Jefferson Early Start Network, which is a collaboration of school system employees, private providers, policymakers, business community, and we talk just about that. How are we going to expand to the masses in Jefferson Parish, not just for 4-year-olds, but birth to 3 in a way that makes sense? And Ronnie, it's not just quantity. I have to like push in on this too. It's not just saying, oh, we've got the class, there's an adult in the room. It can't be that. It's got to be about quality too. It's got to be about access. It's got to be about engagement. It's got to be about the things that are shown to matter in terms of developing that early brain so that they're ready So whenever we do give them access in first grade, second grade, third grade, they're able to approach that and be ready. You know, said it before, I'll say it again, this is the greatest educational challenge of our generation. And we have a lot of things that we can pick from. But for me, educationally, this is it. This has, you know, if we take care of this, we take care of so many other issues moving forward. Right now, a kid at the end of third grade, you know, and we're not just making up third grade. This is like research proven. A kid that is not on grade level with their peers by the end of third grade is 3-4 times more likely to be a high school dropout than the kid that is on grade level for reading at third grade. Some studies will show that in your most impoverished communities, that number is not 2 to 3 times, but it's 10, 11, 12 times. And then you look at our prison population and you see that 80% of prisoners are high school dropouts or they don't have a college degree. And so you have this school to prison pipeline situation that it has not been a conscious decision that we've made, but you know, it's kind of happened. And you don't start that at 12th grade, it goes all the way down to birth. And we have to be there to make sure that we have policy in place and we're advocating for the funds that we need at the state level and the local level to really tackle this issue because it is transformative. And I think that as state superintendent, not only would I want to champion this effort, I mean, I feel obligated to champion this effort. And I would think it would be like a great opportunity for me or whoever you guys select as a state superintendent.
Thank you. Thank you. Important topic. Moving on now to our next topic. There are 4 questions on this topic. So this is an important topic on our educators. So question number 1 on that topic, as state superintendent, how will you leverage experiences along your career path to inspire, motivate, and lead current and future educators in the state of Louisiana?
Yep. Again, this is something I look forward to. One of the things I don't really advertise, but that I do, is, and I'm sharing it here because it's important, it's relative to the question, is every week I hold a faculty meeting in our system somewhere. And I go into the school at the end of the day, and the principal has gathered the faculty together for a conversation with the superintendent. And I say, look, guys, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to pitch you on a product. I'm not here to get you to do something. I'm just here to have conversation with you about what is working, what is not working, what additional supports do you need from me in my office so that we can be better for kids. And I tell them at the beginning of the conversation, look, I'm entering this conversation, maybe naively, but probably not, that we're having this conversation not about what's best for adults, but we're having this conversation about what's best for kids, because that's why we're here. And every week, I tell them, look, take your shots. I can take a punch. I can take it. Let me know, because if you don't let me know, I can't fix it. And so we engage on a host of conversation topics, whether it's English language learners, whether it's technology, early childhood education, curriculum, assessment, teacher leadership, you name it. We talk about it. You know, I usually have a member of the faculty take some notes for me, and I'll tell them if I don't have the answer to your question, I'll get you the answer. They'll email me or pass me a piece of paper at the end of that, and we'll respond where we need to respond. And so that would be the same approach that I would take. I mean, I think that as state superintendent, I would not be confined to an office, but I want to be out where the work is happening to all extent possible. And I want to be someone who, from a traditional career standpoint, who has, you know, although as a first grader I said I want to be the principal, who has been a teacher, who has been a coach, who has been an assistant principal, an assistant superintendent, a superintendent, who is licensed to drive a school bus, although I failed the air brakes test the first time I took it. I can go into these schools and these communities and I can have conversations and lift them up and say, look, I know the struggles. I get it. There's not a more difficult job than being an effective teacher. Anybody can be given a set of keys. You can get a desk, you can get some books and a laptop, and you can call yourself a teacher, but you're not. You're a teacher, an effective teacher, if you take the resources that you have, build relationships with those kids and those families, and at a minimum, move them a year academically for a year's worth of instruction, despite the challenge that the child faces. And that's the message I put forward to our teachers. And it's a message of hope, but it's a message of high expectation. And there's not a time whenever I have left one of these conversations, even when they're heated, even when less than appropriate language may be used, that people don't leave those conversations and say, I think I have a better sense of what's going on. I think I have a better sense of what he's trying to accomplish. And usually we're in a much better situation in those schools to move forward. This cannot be limited to just our schools, these conversations that take place. I have to be someone, and I am because I do it every day, who can go stand in front of Rotary clubs, who can go stand in front of chambers of commerce, business and industry association, in front of colleges and university students and professors. You name the stakeholder, I've got to be in front of them. I've got to be telling them why education matters in the state of Louisiana. I've got to be talking to them about our expectations for myself, for teachers, for them as a community, and what we're going to do together to get there. I'm not a person right now that is going to tell you these are the things we're going to do, because I don't think that's the right approach. But what I can tell you is that I have a host of experiences over a 2-decade career that have put some tools in my toolbox or in my tool belt that have prepared me to stand in front of people, to build policy, to take punches for the best interest of our children. And that's what I would do as state superintendent. I would try to add value to the system while respecting the people and the purpose and the passion of our state.
Thank you. We've spoken a good bit about the teaching profession and so forth. Here's an opportunity to speak to that again in a little bit different content. Question number 9, as specifically as possible, how will you elevate the teaching profession and grow our ranks of certified teachers?
Yeah, so again, I'm sorry we talked about a lot of this earlier, but it's important, and it's an opportunity. When I served in DeSoto, we had built so much energy in the system and out of the system because of just great people. And we had built a salary schedule that really made sense to people, where they were incentivized and also taken care of from a base pay standpoint. We had worked on leadership development, where people could go into buildings and they were working with acceptable leaders, because we surveyed, we gave teachers the opportunity to give input on their principles. We had created a situation where we were able to pull in for almost every teaching job a decent pool of applicants, minus those places where we all know, minus high school math, minus chemistry, physics, minus special education. And so we incentivized that more, and we were able to pull more of those people in. But that will always be a challenge, along with the need for more educators of color. And if you look across the nation, only 2% of our public school teachers in America, really, study will show deviation, but roughly 2% are African American men. That does not reflect our student population. We have got to address that, and we have got to do something about that in the state. But also a growing population. Whenever we talk about students of color, we're not simply talking about African American students. We're talking about, right now, for us in Jefferson specifically, a Hispanic or Latino community that are growing. And so making sure we have educators that look like our kids, I think, is really important. Moving into Jefferson, I was astonished because when I stepped in, I asked in August, when school started, I came in mid-year. I said, when school started in August at the beginning of the year, what did the vacancy number look like? And that number was over 100, meaning like 110, 115, somewhere in that range of classrooms did not have a teacher. That is incredible. Over 100 classrooms without teachers on the first day of school. And I said, we will not do that again. That will not be the situation again. So we initiated a program called Quality from the Start, where we backed up our hiring dates and our hiring processes. And so the next year we started school with, I think, like 40 vacancies on day one. And so then I knew we had to do more, and I knew we were at a disadvantage from a salary standpoint. The system had tried to pass millages in the past to bring up teacher pay unsuccessfully. A year and a half before they tried to pass one, it was defeated. Said from day one, we're going to do something about this issue in Jefferson. So built a plan that lifted base pay for all teachers by about $3,500, built in incentives around high poverty schools, high ELL schools, market responsive stipends for certifications, pay for performance merit. And with that system that we developed, it wasn't a system that necessarily everyone in the teachers union said, oh, that's the system, because there are elements of that they don't like. There were elements that the business community said, I don't really like that part. For instance, we also did a $15 per hour equivalency for all of our support employees to provide a living wage. So there were pieces of this that everybody loved and everybody didn't like, but it was about a comprehensive approach to getting this thing through. And people told me, and I did 60 public meetings over 3 months talking about this plan. And people told me, you won't pass it. People told me, if you pass it at 52%, it's a landslide. And we passed it at 72% in conservative Jefferson Parish, and got our teachers their first pay raise in 10 years. And so then this year when school started, I say that to say this, we were around 20 vacancies. And so at the start of school, so we've made a tremendous difference in making sure we had a teacher in front of every child on the first day of school. Every week, our director of human resource gives me an update by school, by district of our vacancies. I go down and I push that recruiting team. Why are we here? And they get frustrated maybe because I'm pushing too hard. And then they say, we only have 13 openings and we have 3,200 teachers. That's not too bad. I say, yeah, but it's not good enough. And so we push some more. So I know that we're only going to go as far as the quality of teacher that we have in front of our kids. And so as state superintendent, I will continue to push forward policies. I will continue to look to programs, as I mentioned earlier, like Educators Rising, and programs that are really developing our own. I think we have to look at alternative pathways to education. We have talented, intelligent, committed people out there that are in other sectors that quite honestly can come in with experiences that we don't have as traditional educators that benefit kids. We have to get them ready. I've done some of that work before with AltCert within our system. We have to look at this thing across the board, not just trying to do one thing, not expecting universities to provide all of our teachers, but looking at them to do their part, but looking at other people to help as well, to make sure that every child has a quality teacher in front of them at the first day of school and at every point in between, in every content area, and a teaching force that looks like our community.
Okay, thank you. Question number 10, we haven't spoke to yet, very much detail. So question number 10, how do you measure accountability for teachers, for schools, and for the system to best incentivize performance?
Yeah. So this has been a process over a decade for us in the state of Louisiana, a process that I've lived through. I believe that Louisiana has a strong accountability system. I believe that it is robust. I believe that it takes into account a number of different indicators. And I think that it gives our public a general picture of where our schools are. I have some differences from some of my colleagues. I believe letter grades are a good thing. I believe it tells us where our schools are. I think that there's room for discussion on, how do you get to that? But I think that we've done a good job in our state, and we've identified it through our ESSA plan of how we will have an accountability system in the state of Louisiana. And I think we've done a good job. I think it's comprehensive. I think it looks at some of the most important indicators of success with our kids. I'm not someone who thinks that you measure inputs. I think that you measure outputs. So there are conversations about, well, only 70% of my staff is certified, so there should be some percent of the formula that takes that into account. I don't believe that. I believe that we're not measuring inputs, we should be measuring outputs, but we work as a system to help take care of the inputs so the outputs are better. So I think we continue on with these things, but I think if you look at the system, there's room for discussion around some things. A few years ago, I remember sitting in State Superintendent in the conference room with him, and a couple of staff members may have been in there, but certainly a few other superintendents. And I talked to the need that we don't necessarily have accountability in K2, okay? And so there are unintended consequences of that when you don't have an accountability system in K2. And so you might ask, well, what are those things? Well, from a standpoint on the ground, unattended might be principals are taking some of their best teachers and putting them in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I see that. I know that. That's the game of it. But should we be placing those teachers? In K1, 2, but the accountability system only measures that once they get to 3, 4, 5. So an unintended consequence, I think, of not having some form of accountability in K2 is moving some of your most successful teachers to other grades when maybe they need to be in earlier grades. I think that as I talk to our schools and schools outside of our district, there still is this conversation around should we be measuring academic performance for status versus growth of kids, and what does that balance need to be? My general thought is that you have to measure both, and I think it's a matter of getting that percentage in the place that it needs to be. Had the opportunity to advocate in Bessie whenever I was president of the Superintendents Association for the accountability system and for growth being a factor of that, because we had the previous system that had bonus points and it was completely volatile. Your system was either a hero or a zero based on 10 bonus points. And so I think the growth measure is a good value add for the system, but I still think we need to make sure those percentages are right and we're measuring both things. And again, it's not a place where I'm trying to tear things down. It's just a place where I think we need to have conversation. So, I have some of our schools that over 50% of the kids are Hispanic speaking students, low income Hispanic speaking students. And you go into those schools and you're checking out the things that the teachers and the leaders are doing, and you're really pleased and you see that they're doing important things. But then what then is the likelihood that a child that just moves into the country, and we have about 2,000 a year in Jefferson, that they're going to master the English test next year? It's the same as if I were a student and I was an English speaking American, and you send me to China and you say next year go master the Chinese test. And Chinese educational system, if Cade doesn't master that test, it's your fault. Well, I'm more interested in those situations of, have I grown Cade? Have I added value to him? Has he progressed under me? So I think we have to make sure that we have a good balance between academic performance and growth. I think there's also an economic component of that. And, I know I'm getting in the weeds, but it's the stuff I think about. If you take a school that's maybe it's low performing, maybe you have a high degree of newcomers to that school, and you base completely on academic performance and not on growth, and those numbers come out, then they may not be good. So unintended consequence, some of your maybe middle class families in that community who are looking for an option they may not choose to use that school because they look at that score. Wherein, if you're looking at the growth piece, they may have an A on growth. They may be moving kids a year or 2 years. And so you're never pulling children into the system. And then when corporations look at where do they want to locate, and they look at some of these factors and they say, well, we can't go to Metro New Orleans, we can't go to EBR because of this or that. If they knew, and whether that's 2 different scores or whether that's a percentage of the scores, if they knew that, yeah, these schools are growing these kids at a rate of a year or 2 years for each year of instruction, I think that makes a lot of sense to people. And it uplifts people who are doing hard work. And I think we have to look at those things. I think we have to have some discussion around graduation rates with international students who are transient. You know, in Jefferson, we will get students, like I said, we're having about 2,000 this year who move into the country. As part of their process, they have to enroll in a school. But at the same time, they may be needing to provide for a family or send money back to their home country, and so they'll enroll. And then a few days later, at no fault of the school, they leave the system, and then they're a dropout for the school. Well, that's not the school's fault. The school didn't do that. Now, if you've got a kid a year, yeah, you need to hang on to that kid, or a half a year. We need to look at that. And I think that there are discussions that have to take place, very technical discussions about how we handle accountability this year and how we handle accountability next year in the system because of the coronavirus situation. You know, in Jefferson, whether the state assigns us a score or not, we're going to have our score because we're going to progress monitor all of our data. We have our third quarter data that hit right before school was closed. And we can pull in, if we continue certification processes on graduates from last year and strength of diploma certification, we can pull that in. Maybe we'll have an ACT test in June. We can pull that in. We'll use at a minimum, we'll use our third quarter progress monitoring for the assessment index. And we'll get a sense of where our kids are here in Jefferson. I think that parents need the opportunity. If they want to test their kid, they should have that opportunity. And then next year, when we think about next year, if we are congregate, or if we do make processes to be substantively online, then maybe there aren't shifts for next year that need to happen, other than maybe some of the factors with middle school students taking 8th grade courses that didn't get to take tests this year, et cetera. And grad rates may be a little elevated, depending on the level of grace that Bessie provides to our seniors right now, which we've got to provide a lot because this is not the seniors' fault. But we're just going to have to work through that. And I think that's a place where, again, I just take a balanced approach to this and listen to good counsel from Bessie, from state leaders, from people in our schools, whether traditional district or charters, and move the state forward. So I think we've built a good system. I think there's always room to see what's working, what's not working. And I think that the system is larger than just the system itself, but it's for information for families and for our local economy.
All right.
Excuse me, gentlemen, I just want to indicate that we've passed another 30 or so minutes and we have about that much time left.
Okay, so moving on, Cade, we're on question number 11 of 16, and it's the last question in the educator topic. You spoke already briefly about principals, so question number 11 follows up on that. What are your thoughts on how best to increase support for principals in their roles?
Yeah, I think that this is really a place where we have to do some work at the state level. I applaud the state for the work that they've done around teacher leadership. It's a place where Bessie and the department deserves a lot of credit around teacher leadership. It's something that in DeSoto we were doing. When I arrived in Jefferson in our first year, we made a commitment to get 100 teacher leaders up and going and trained and give responsibilities and some stipends. And so we did that. This year we're over 400 teacher leaders in Bessie that are champions in our schools and pushing forward curriculum and professional development. And so all of that to say, I think that our state has done a really good job on the teacher leader piece. But I think that most people would agree that principal leadership and principal development is a place where we need some work. You know, if I had to hire 3 high school principals today for an urban setting that I felt really confident would be successful, Ronnie, I couldn't tell you right now that I could do that. You know, it may be a little bit easier at the elementary level, but certainly that's just around filling a spot, not necessarily the quality that our schools need. So looking at this in a couple of different ways. In 2 systems, I've created an Aspiring Leaders program where we take a group of leaders that want to go into the principalship, and we provide them like formal classroom type training, whether it's on site or online, but also really expose them to leaders and schools that are being successful, so that we're grooming our own to go into these roles and be successful with the nuances of Louisiana education. So I would really hope that I could work with groups both within the state who are interested in principal development and associations, but also external forces that focus on principal leadership, as well as whatever my team looks like that is built at the State Department to try and really support an Aspiring Leaders program for principals. But then the other side of that is developing capacity within our current set of principals. This might be something easier for a Jefferson, a Caddo, an EBR, or an Orleans, where they may have resources to do this. But again, if you're in a rural area, or even sometimes in a suburban area, it may be a different set of challenges, that they don't have staff to support an Aspiring Leaders program. So maybe that's a place where we can step in and help. You know, this is the principalship from both a research base and from a professional standpoint has been like my space. And not to say that I'm the expert in it, but to say it's a place where I've spent a lot of time, and I have, you know, some really firm beliefs on both the awesomeness and opportunity and responsibility for the school principal in the state of Louisiana. You can walk in a school so many times, and within 3 minutes, I can describe the principal to you. And you know, we need to be walking in schools and across the board, not just in middle class schools, but across the board, walking in and making sure that we have provided the support to our principals that they need to be successful, but also building a bench. So whenever they step out, that people are ready to step in. And this really is a place where I think the state can do a lot of work to help bridge a divide that really doesn't exist.
Thank you. So we've got 5 questions remaining in your closing remarks. So question number 12 is on the topic of charter schools. So do you support ongoing expansion of quality charter schools, and what would you change about our charter school laws if you could?
Ryan, just for clarification, I don't know if you can tell me, but is this a choice question in general, or is this specific just to charter schools?
This is specific to charter schools.
Okay. I think the way to evaluate my approach to charter is to look at my record. While I have been in the traditional school setting, the traditional district, if you look at my work in Jefferson, I think it shows my inclination to support great schools, whatever they look like. We have a portfolio of schools in Jefferson Parish. We have 82 schools, and 5 of them are type 1 schools. We have a type 2, you know, we don't necessarily have oversight of our type 2, but our type 1s. And so I think that our portfolio model is one that's appropriate. I don't think every district in the state needs to be completely charter, and maybe not necessarily does it need to be traditionally district run. I always answer the question that I believe in great schools, whatever they look like. But whenever I specifically think of charters, the approach that I have taken in Jefferson has been, one, do you have a place that's historically failing children? And if so, is there a role for the charter in helping that situation? And so recently we have an impoverished community And we were able to work with our community leaders, work with one of our charter partners, and next year we'll be opening the Ochsner Dr. John Ochsner Community School in Jefferson Parish. And so it's a collaboration with Ochsner Hospital, our Discovery Schools, and the Jefferson Parish school system. And so one of the ways that I supported that and worked with our board to support that is that we provided the land for the building of that. We had an alternative site that needed work. It was not appropriate. So we moved that alternative school where we could provide more wraparound services for them. And on that site did basically a no-cost lease to this cooperation between JP Schools, our Discovery Charter, and Ochsner Hospital. And so we'll be opening up a K-8 that will specialize in the sciences, and specifically the medical sciences, STEM-related subjects, in an impoverished area of our community. And so I'm excited about us opening up that Type 1 charter. We were supposed to have groundbreaking, but we can't congregate, so we weren't able to have groundbreaking. The other place where I think charters make a lot of sense is innovation or innovative ideas. So roughly six months or so, 4, 5, 6 months after being superintendent in Jefferson, one of the things that I saw was the need with our growing Hispanic population, where we may have some opportunity for a charter to help us serve that population specifically. You know, right now we receive about 1,500 to 2,000 newcomers a year into our system from Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico. And so I reached out to the Charter Association and I said, look, are you aware of any charters that specialize in servicing the newcomer population of the Spanish-speaking community? And we didn't really come to a consensus at that moment, but after that, was able to connect with Idea Charter, which got its startup in the Rio Grande Valley over in Texas, and they're showing tremendous success with kids, especially in college entry for kids that are Hispanic speaking, and that's what we needed here. And so moving forward into next year, you know, I recommended to my board and they approved Idea Charter, which will be another Type 1 for us in Jefferson Parish, specifically aimed at servicing our Hispanic speaking students. And so for us, it was an innovative kind of nuanced need that made sense for us that we needed to do that we couldn't serve. And so I look forward to that partnership with Idea, and the community members and the business community have bought into this. And so I think they're going to have a great start when they come on. Another area I think that might be opportunity moving forward is just not just from historically failing or innovative nuance, but financial. Charters do not have some of the financial constraints, although they have others, that traditional public schools may have. And I think with what could happen with the economy, some of the local districts might want to explore is that from a financial standpoint, given what might be tremendous revenue downturns, does it make sense to even do conversion? Maybe some conversion processes. I don't know. I mean, I think that all has to be explored. At the state level, you know, I would not be recommending Type 1s, although I think that charters do work best when it's a cooperation with their local school board and the charters as Type 1. But state law and Bulletin 126, I believe, calls for the state board to authorize Type 2. And so I think if you look at the way I've described my work with Type 1, I think it plays over into the way I would approach my work with Type 2s. We put in our 2024 plan, which is our 5-year strategic plan in Jefferson, that we wanted to be inclusive of our charter partners. We labeled it out, we said it. And so because of that, all of our charters have been part of professional development. Should they want to do that, I have to balance autonomy versus support, making sure that I get that right. Each semester, I have a collaboration with our charter leaders to say what's working, what can I do for you, what do you need? We did not have a Jefferson-centric evaluation or renewal process. I've been pretty committed to trying to build a model process for extension and evaluation and extension of our charters. So I've worked with the association. We built our staff, we built a model of what does evaluation look like for our Type 1s. And I said, I want it to go beyond evaluation. I want the evaluation to inform extension. So we built a draft. We pulled our charter leaders in. We said, look, give us feedback on this document. We've taken that. We've made their suggested shifts because we want it to be right for them as much as it has to be right for the community as a whole. And I was going to take that to our April board meeting, but given circumstances, I'm probably going to have to push that to May. But just working alongside them to make this what it needs to be to benefit them. I have 5,000 of our nearly 51,000 kids in charter, and we invest about $52 million into these schools, type 1. I need them to be successful. I want them to be successful. Those are our kids. We have a charter leader that kind of jokes at me that I always say our kids about the charters, and I do, but 51,000, 5,000 charter, they're all our kids. Type 2, I would approach that the same way. I think you recruit the best operators. I think that so much of the importance of the charter is at the authorization process, making sure up front you have very clear expectations of what needs to happen, how they'll be evaluated. And that's why with the extension and evaluation model I'm building in Jefferson with our team, if our charters hit certain marks, they get additional years. And so if you do this, you get this. And I think that's a model that is used at the state. And I think it would be something we would continue to use with supporting high quality, not just everyone who wants to have a charter should have a charter. And I commend Bessie because they have been more stringent on type 2 charters recently. And I think it's delivering a higher quality product for kids. But if you talk about what my concern is with charters, and I've been very upfront with this from the beginning, is one of my concerns with our charters is charters trying to be a better version of the traditional school. You know, I don't think that's what they should be. I don't think that they just simply need to be a better version of the traditional district school. I think if they're serving in a historically failing population, if they're innovating, if it's a nuance, the charter needs to be that charter. And it needs to do what it was authorized to do in the scope of service that it was authorized to do. And so had a number of conversations encouraging charters to not be just a better traditional school, but to be something different and be a place where other schools can say, oh, you know, that's like an incubator of an idea. Now we can take that idea and do that within our own system. So look at my work. Look at the actual work that I've done with charters. And I think that you'll find that it's appropriate, it's supportive, it supports a portfolio model, it's building new schools, it's bringing in the community, it's putting more kids in higher performing schools. And I would take that same approach at the district. I mean,
Thank you. Thank you. We have 4 questions remaining. So question number 13 speaks to access to college. So what's been your experience, if any, with access to college and or dual enrollment models?
Yeah. One of the things that I'm most thankful for, I won't say most proud of because we're not supposed to be proud, but one of the things I'm most thankful for, when I served in DeSoto, the year or two previously, the grad rate was 67, 68%. I want to say my first year was 71, 72%. And I remember being at an event, and it wasn't even an event related to graduation rates. It was just a community event. And I had just gotten this news of what the graduation rate looked like. And I stood up, and it was a minority population audience. And I said, guys, this is just not acceptable. This just won't work. We have to do better than this for our kids. And I challenged them to help me. And I know the street, I know the location, I know the building, I know the parking lot where this conversation took place. And I told them right there, I would make this better. And so in DeSoto, from a number of factors, from just higher quality teaching to cohort tracking to opportunities to relationships to mentoring, we were able to raise that cohort graduation rate to the mid-90s. So over a 20% jump in graduation rate. And our minority graduation rate was higher than our Caucasian American graduation rate. whenever I left the system, and we were roughly a 50-50 black-white system at the time. And so I made a promise of what I would do, and I didn't deliver, but we delivered. We delivered for kids. And it wasn't just about the graduation rate, but it was also about what those diplomas meant. And one of the things I'm, again, most thankful for is that the Advanced Placement College Board recognized our system twice on the National Advanced Placement Honor Roll. And the Advanced Placement Honor Roll only had about 500 systems in all of North America each year. And the way that you landed on that honor roll was by increasing your advanced placement courses, but also increasing and the percentage of minority students in those courses, and then increasing the scoring on those courses, or scores that were at 3 or higher. And so 2 times we were recognized on the Advanced Placement Honor Roll. Simultaneously, we built relationships with our colleges and universities, and we built a model called Dream On. And the idea was we would, and I went to the colleges and I said, look, I don't think this should be a guessing game for our kids. I don't think it should be, we get to October, December, February of senior year, and they turn in an application, and it's a guess about will you accept them. It's a guess about will you get scholarship. I want us to work together and put it in writing that if kid does this with their GPA, if kid does this with dual enrollment, with ACT, then you're going to not only admit them to your college, but you're going to admit them with varying degrees of scholarship. And I was thankful to be able to win support from some of our university presidents in Northwest Louisiana to do just that and develop this Dream On model. And because of that, our students midway through their senior year knew where they were being accepted. They already knew their scholarship dollars before they even submitted the application. That process also allowed me and my team to build relationships with the universities to further support the dual enrollment process. I think that there are studies that show that students who are engaged in dual enrollment specifically with colleges, if they're involved in that in high school, they're more likely to be successful in freshman year of college once they get there. And I think that this is important. There are a couple of key milestones in our students, one of them being we have to do things to make sure that our students, when they're in our freshman year of high school, that after a year they have enough credits to be sufficiently credited to be a sophomore. Because of our roughly 700,000 students in Louisiana, the data tell us that students who aren't sufficiently credited after freshman year are more likely to drop out. Well, again, whenever you talk about, on that same thought process, whenever you talk about students entering college, it's not just about entering college, it's about being successful when you get there. And so that's why I think that dual enrollment really does matter. I'd want to listen to the recommendations of the dual enrollment task force. They've done incredible work, and try as much as possible to implement those recommendations, because I think that if we get our students engaged in dual enrollment in high school, it's not just about them being smarter in high school or them getting credits right then. It leads to them being successful and their retention after year one of college.
Okay, thank you.
So
We have three.
That was what we did in DeSoto. We're doing the same type of stuff in Jefferson. We're just getting more of it going. It's not fully developed yet. We're trying to get there. It's a larger system, but we're on our way.
Awesome, awesome. Look, we have 3 questions left in your closing comments. So I'm on question 14, which is career and technical education. The state has made great strides with its nationally recognized Jumpstart career and technical education program. However, there remains a stigma associated with CTE in the state. What measures would you take to change the perception of CTE here? What would you do to further build relationships with business and industry?
Yeah. So whenever we developed our 5-year plan here in Jefferson, and we said that our goal is about getting the education that our kids deserve, because I believe they deserve it, and preparing them for career or college, we deliberately said career before college. it wasn't just because CA becomes first in the alphabet before CO. It was because for too long in Louisiana education, we have diminished the value of career and technical education, the vocational trades, whatever name you call them, you get the point. We've diminished the value of those things, and we have to be deliberate in elevating this moving forward. There are groups out there who I would want to partner with that would help us in terms of marketing, and help us in terms of advertising, and help us in terms of informing our public, but also our state educators on elevating career and technical education in the state. And it's a place where we have not done a really good job of overcoming the stigma. And I don't think we can do it just within the walls of the system. We're going to need some external help to be able to do that. There are nonprofits that are in that space that I think will help us do the work. I've talked with some of them here in Jefferson that are on board with helping us do that work here and overcoming the stigma. I think my work in both DeSoto and Jefferson showed that this is a place of real importance for me. Just in Jefferson alone, we've seen a 62% increase in career and technical education endorsements since we've been here. 62%. It's pretty incredible. And how do we do that? One has to do with scheduling in the high schools. You know, you have to approach scheduling in a way that makes sense so that kids can get the credentials that they need. I'm blessed. I have a personal scheduler at my house. My wife is a high school counselor, works for a type 2 charter in the state. And before that, spent 15 years in brick and mortar high school. And so she is always tells me when I'm wrong about something, but is certainly a support when it comes to this, and is my best friend. But some of my greatest supporters are, you know, the Chamber of Commerce here in Jefferson, but also back in North Louisiana, Business Association, Economic Development Council, Business Council. We have 4 primary groups in Jefferson that help do this work. They are with me. They are supporting the work that I do. They know that I prioritized economic development, not just for Jefferson, but this region. Jumpstart 2.0 is underway. I applaud the board for going ahead and passing that forward, even though, you know, like superintendents have to do from time to time, let's pass it. Let's go back and look at what shifts we need to make and make it better. And so I applaud Bessie for doing that. And I think that speaking with my workforce development director here in Jefferson, he's engaged in that process of trying to help make that better. And so I appreciate that. I am a little concerned, and, you know, again, critics might, you know, throw a rock at me for this, but I am a little concerned still with Jumpstart that in some cases we're preparing students still for jobs that are poverty level jobs. And I don't think we should celebrate that if someone is capable of doing more than that. And I know that being able to get a credential is important, but I also know that for students who are capable of doing more, we have to make sure that if it is not an advanced credential, that at minimum it's a stackable credential. So if it's a CNA, let's make it where it can be an LPN or an RN. So as much as possible, having stackable credentials. And Ronnie, I'm going to tell you, I think that even with Jumpstart and Jumpstart 2.0, I still think we're just nibbling around the edges with this. I don't know that we've truly taken this to the level of seriousness that it needs. And I think that we should be exploring additional partnerships with our community colleges around dual diplomas. I think we could pilot some opportunities around dual diplomas where we do early release of students in their high school years, a true release, and put them at those campuses and say, look, if you want to be a this, then you become a this. And we're going to say that you've met these competencies as a student in the high school, you've sufficiently passed these courses, this assessment, whatever that might be. And if they graduate with that credential from that community college, give them a dual diploma. And so I'm not saying let's go out en masse and do this, but I think that those are some of the creative things we should be exploring. as we move forward. And also, I think right now, you look at some professions where there are shortages, especially with the coronavirus situation. Maybe there's an opportunity to do some surge. Some of our students who are ready, who want to go into some of these areas where our economy really needs them, their families want them to move into some of these roles. Maybe we could, some of our students who are interested, capable, competent, surge them out into training programs where they can be prepared for the demands that are needed in our economy. So Jumpstart 2.0 is solid. It's good. People are doing great work in the schools. We can always do more. I don't want to just nibble around things, though. I think we have some opportunity to do some other creative pilots to do more.
Thank you. So, Cade, we have 2 questions remaining in your closing comments. You spoke extensively already about the coronavirus, but question 15 speaks to the coronavirus, and there's actually 4 parts. So the virus has turned our education system on its head. Part A, what are the most important things we need to do right now? Part B, what does this mean for our K-12 model in the long term? Part C, what is the collateral damage? And are there any upside or opportunity? And lastly, what's been your role as leader during the COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, so I've spoke to a lot of this, so I'll try and keep it brief because I know our time is running short. I have, from the beginning, even before I heard the term flatten the curve, we've been trying to flatten the curve. We canceled assemblies, we canceled field trips. People said that was the wrong thing to do, and I felt like it was the right thing to do. And so we were flattening the curve cool before it was cool. This is so important. I have been insistent that our team get up, grab and go sites for our students. And now we're actually starting delivery into our communities as well. I've been insistent that we provide online resources, but not just for the general student, but for diverse learners, EL students, accelerated learners, collaboration with our public libraries. So we have a whole host of services that are online for our kids right now, daily schedules, everything. Super proud of our team around that. I wanted it to be great because I knew that being such a large system, some of the other systems would need some of our information. So I wanted to be there for them. And so I've been supplying our other systems with guidance as they've requested it. The day the governor closed schools, we immediately held an emergency board meeting, declared emergency declaration, so we could begin some of the processes and give me some of the flexibility to make some of the quick moves that we needed. I have worked in concert with our parish president, have stood beside her at press conferences with our coroner, with our sheriff, so that our public could see a united front around this. We're trying to be everything that our kids need to be and our families need for us in the gap. We have homework helplines, we have emotional support helplines, you name it, we're trying to do it. I want to at the same time say that the governor closed schools, I believe, 2 days after the state superintendent left. And so you have your acting state superintendent who's a career public servant who had to step into a really hard role. And I think that given the situation, given what she's dealing with, and given what the work she had been doing, I think we have to say thank you to her for what she's tried to do in these times, as well as leadership with Bessie of trying to get out some guidance. Immediately, the most pressing thing would be seniors. That is the number one thing. We have to make sure that we get these students, we're signing their diplomas in this spring so that they're graduates if they need to be graduates. That's the most immediate thing. Trying to be short. Technological readiness moving forward, financial recovery moving forward. These are all things I've dealt with. I think I can support our systems as we move forward through this process.
Great. Last question, and then your closing remarks. How would you describe or characterize your own fluency related to education technology or distance learning?
Yeah, well, I mean, personally, I'm a lifetime learner. I've had more Zooms and conference calls the past 2 weeks than I think I've had my entire life. But if you look back in DeSoto, we did go one-to-one before a number of people went one-to-one with our students. We've tried to incorporate the technology as much as possible. In Jefferson, we're trying to do this, but at the same time recognizing we have a long way to go. That's one of the reasons why I'm really excited about the stimulus money, because I think it's a place where we can really elevate that area. I know time's short, so I'm going to try and wrap it up. But one of the things I think this has prompted is just remarkable innovation from school teams and families. And I think that education will not be the same. We have got to take care of our traditional districts. We've got to take care of our charter systems, and we've got to work together. But we all have to realize, and I think come to terms with the fact that there have to be some shifts and some innovation has happened that will help lead us through some of those shifts. But as we enter into next school year, we have to be ready on day one, whatever day one is, to again go remote if we have to go remote. And that's got to be a priority.